Continuing on with Chapter 15, history taking. This is where you investigate that chief complaint. You want to report any pertinent negatives that the patient may have, things that you would expect to be there that truly aren't. You're going to find out what the patient has done for their current breathing problem, differentiate respiratory complaints from other clues and challenges, trying to determine the patient's baseline status on a normal day, which truly may not be normal for most patients. When the patient's in respiratory distress, we want to get sample, and OPQRST can be modified so that you can still get valuable information about the breathing problem. You want to ask specific questions about respiratory distress, such as what is the patient's overall state of health, any childhood or adult diseases, any recent surgical procedures or hospitalizations. Those definitely increase the possibility for the patient to have some sort of clot. And then, have there been any traumatic injuries? The text does introduce the paced mnemonic to help with assessing the complaint of shortness of breath or difficulty breathing. So progression, how did it start? How is it progressing? Is there any associated chest pain? Any sputum? If so, has it been increased and what color is it? Do you get tired from talking? And then are you able to do any exercise before you get dyspnea? Then we move on to our secondary assessment. We're going to do a more in-depth assessment of the body systems that can be associated. This is only after you have addressed all of those life threats. Keep an open mind, gather as complete a history as possible, and then you may want to include the respiratory system, cardiovascular system, the skin, the blood pressure, and the neurologic system as part of your secondary assessment. You want to use your monitoring devices if you have them to try and continue to narrow down those differentials into your working diagnosis, or your field diagnosis. Secondary assessment of COPD versus congestive heart failure is very prevalent when you're talking about respiratory distress as your chief complaint. So you want to look for signs of COPD. Patients with COPD tend to be older than 50, often have a pretty extensive history of lung problems, have been or currently are smokers. They complain of tightness in the chest and constant fatigue. They may have that barrel-like appearance from having that air trapping. They often use accessory muscles to breathe and exhibit abnormal breath sounds. That's going to kind of steer you towards lung versus heart failure. For our reassessment, you want to just continue to repeat the primary assessment to try and determine if there's been any changes in the patient's condition. You want to confirm the adequacy of any of the interventions that you've performed, as well as the patient's status. If the patient's stable, then we are only going to obtain vitals every 15 minutes. If they are not stable, then we take that down to every 5. Potential interventions for respiratory problems at the EMT level include positioning first and foremost. Positioning can actually go a long way for the patient, and they may want to be up in the high Fowlers or just whatever's comfortable for them. Providing oxygen via either non-rebreathing mask at 15 liters per minute. They may need positive pressure ventilations using a BVM. You may have to insert a airway adjunct, so either an OPA, NPA. You may need to suction the patient. They may need continuous positive airway pressure, or CPAP, to assist with their respirations. And then you may need to assist them with respiratory medications. Make sure that you communicate all of the relevant information to your receiving facility. If the patient complains of any difficulty breathing, we're not going to withhold oxygen. You just need to try and figure out by monitoring respirations to see what's going on with your patient and what the best form of administering oxygen to them will be. If your patient's significantly having problems, you may want to think about going up to a BVM or a CPAP machine. The patient may already have a metered dose inhaler or a nebulizer. Consult medical control, make sure the medication is actually indicated, and then ensure that there's no contraindication for administration of that medication. The patient is unable to help coordinate that inhalation if they can't actually take a breath to get that medication in. It's not going to do any good. Make sure that that is prescribed to the patient, that your medication is permissible by local protocol, that the patient hasn't already met the maximum prescribed dose, that the medication is not expired. Most of the medications are going to relax the muscles that surround the passages in the lungs, leading to dilation of the airways. That's what you're trying to go for. There are some side effects of those inhalers, the most common being increased pulse rate, nervousness, muscle tremors. That is normal. So you would expect after giving somebody albuterol for their pulse to increase, for them to kind of get shaky and anxious. If the patient takes their medication like they're supposed to, they should know that that's coming on. If you end up doing this as part of your local protocol and administering a small dose volume nebulizer, they may not be as aware. Treating upper or lower airway infections, oftentimes we're not going to do a whole lot for the patient in the field. Administer humidified oxygen if it's available, just regular oxygen otherwise. If you suspect epiglottitis, remember we're not inserting anything into the airway. We're not even really looking into the airway or suctioning. We just want to leave them alone and have them be as calm as possible. So position of comfort and then transport. Acute pulmonary edema, 100% oxygen. Suction if necessary. Allow them to position themselves very comfortably. If the patient's unconscious, you may need to fully support their airway, including placement of an airway adjunct. If it's indicated and allowed by your protocol, somebody with acute pulmonary edema can greatly benefit from CPAP. So definitely see if that's something that you can help your patient out with. COPD, you want to go ahead and put your patient on oxygen like everything else. Assist them with their prescribed inhaler and watch for side effects. Make sure that you document any of those. Put the patient in a position of comfort and transport. For asthma, hay fever, and anaphylaxis, determine if asthma really is the problem. Be prepared to suction since they have that overproduction of mucus. Assist them with their prescribed inhaler. Provide aggressive airway management, oxygen, and prompt transport. If they have a prolonged asthma attack that's unrelieved and continues to go further and further, this is called status asthmaticus, and this is a true emergency. So we want to give oxygen, promptly transport, and potentially have ALS intercept. Hay fever itself is unlikely to need emergency treatment. Typically, you're just going to give oxygen based on the level of distress. Anaphylaxis, if you can, remove the offending agent or that triggering agent, maintain the airway, transport rapidly, and administer epi if allowed by a local protocol, or assist the patient in taking their own EpiPen. Spontaneous pneumo, provide supplemental oxygen, transport promptly. You want to monitor very, very carefully, and you want to be very conscientious of providing positive pressure ventilation, because that can actually make that pneumothorax worse. So if the patient doesn't need to be bagged, really we try not to bag them as much as possible. Pleural effusion, they have to get to the hospital because they have to have that fluid removed. So what we can do in the meantime is provide oxygen, allow them to sit in a position of comfort. Generally, it's going to be seated upright, and then transport them. Obstruction of the airway, partial obstruction, provide supplemental oxygen, transport, encourage coughing to try and clear the obstruction. If they have a complete obstruction, we want to try and clear the obstruction ourselves, either through the Heimlich maneuver or abdominal thrusts on a patient that's conscious, or CPR with the modified looking for the object if the patient is unconscious, and then transport rapidly. A pulmonary embolus, supplemental oxygen is mandatory. Oftentimes, you're not going to see the patient significantly improve with that. Kind of depends on what is blocked and where it's blocked. You want to position your patient comfortably. If they have hemoptysis or that coughing up of that blood, make sure they have suction available to them, and then transport. Hyperventilation, you want to complete a thorough primary assessment and history so that you can try and discern why the patient is having this problem. We're not breathing into that paper bag. We're going to reassure, provide emotional support, supplemental oxygen, and then transport. Environmental exposure, ensure that your patients are decontaminated before you bring them with you into your ambulance, and for sure into the ER. You're going to treat with oxygen, adjuncts, and suction based on presentation. Foreign body aspiration, perform any sort of airway clearing techniques that are specific to the age and situation, suction as needed, and then provide oxygen and transport. Tracheostomy dysfunction, the big thing here is to resecure a patent airway. You want to try and position comfortably. Excuse me, suction is going to be a huge thing with these patients because of that tracheostomy. They're going to overproduce mucus. So suction, 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 and try to oxygenate the patient once you start clearing that obstruction. Asthma, for children, blow-by oxygen is often going to be more effective than putting a mask in their face because they already feel like they're suffocating. So blow-by, if they'll tolerate an oxygen mask, then you can use that as well. Use your metered dose inhalers with your older patients. Help them administer their own medication. Keep in mind that with any chronic disease, such as asthma, it can be life-threatening in somebody that's older. And the final condition is cystic fibrosis. This is a genetic disorder that typically affects the lungs or the digestive system, but this predisposes people that have this condition to repeated severe lung infections. Oftentimes, they're well aware that they have cystic fibrosis, and they go through several treatments a day to try and mitigate the symptoms. It's not something that can be fully treated. Symptoms range from simple nasal congestion to wheezing and asthma-like complaints. If they have it affecting their digestive system, they often have to take medication so that they can digest their food appropriately. Usually parents or caregivers call EMS because they're having severe dyspnea and they can't manage it at home anymore. Suctioning is going to be helpful because they often overproduce mucus, and then oxygenate as needed depending on what's going on with the patient. And this is it for chapter 15.